Veld Koning Machinefabriek. Vekoma. Wow, what an absolute mess this company has gone through. For the longest time, Vekoma was hated for making shitty rides that bashed your head. Like, we're talking bulky ass restraints on brick road track. It was bad. But now I'm hearing Vekoma now makes amazing rides? How the f did that happen? This is the massive redemption of Vekoma. This rocky history began in 1926 when Vekoma out in the Netherlands started making farming equipment. Yeah, that's right, they made tools designed to grow food from the dirt. This lasted until 1954 when Vekoma shifted its production to steel manufacturing. During this era, Vekoma mostly produced steel structures for companies. They didn't actually make roller coasters until the mid-1970s, where a familiar face would show up on their doorstep. On the other side of the Atlantic, American manufacturer Aerodynamics flourished with their American coasters. However, Aero had a much tougher time with their overseas projects due to their shipping costs costing more than your rent after blowing your whole budget on vodka. So Aerodynamics approached Vekoma to build the steel structures of the roller coasters. Vekoma would fabricate the track, while Aero built the trains and constructed the coaster. As demand increased, Aero instructed Vekoma in track building techniques and eventually licensed its coaster building technology. With this learning, Vekoma soon started building coasters of their own, with the help of Aero of course. Now I have to debunk a rumor that Vekoma stole Aero's track. That is not true. If that was the case, that lawsuit would have been bigger than Queso after 10 rounds of Waffle House. What happened was that Vekoma licensed the Aero track and even the layout. This collab would be the MK1200, aka the knockoff Aero Loopers before the knockoff Aero Loopers. Just like the Lego set you bought off Temu. The reason I say that is because these MKs use Aero trackage supports. This is why most Vekoma's pre-2000s are mistaken for Aero coasters. The first three were the corkscrews with Bayern curve in 1979. These coasters are essentially a double corkscrew and a bunch of turns. 3 went to Wallaby, Belgium, Movie Park, Germany, and Holiday Park. A whopping 31 MK1200s were produced before being discontinued by 2000. The reason for this is because the MK1200 mostly consists of 4 preset layouts with a handful of custom orders. See, Vekoma's biggest niche is that they are able to produce clonable, high-thrill coasters for a very cheap price, just like an OnlyFans girl giving her account infographic sheet in college. Now these rides were janky and way rougher than your ability to drive a car, but when that's your only options for loopers, you kinda have to just suck it up. In 1981, Vekoma began branching out to make bigger rides, starting with Python at F.L.Y, a double looping corkscrew similar to Aero's Carolina Cyclone. But we wouldn't see Vekoma's true nature until 1983. That year, Vekoma discontinued working for other companies as Vekoma was determined to make coasters of their own. And we would see this in 1984 with one of their most iconic models. In 1982, Vekoma started production on one of their icons, the Boomerang. The Boomerang is a shuttle coaster that consists of 2 slanted spikes, the first ever Cobra roll, and a vertical loop. How they complete the circuit is with a catch car lift and a regular chain lift. The Boomerang was a high-thrill ride for a cheap price, low maintenance, and compact footprint. These traits are the reason 52 installations were produced and sold. Wait a minute, hold on, what the f***? 52 boomerangs that are still open? How? That's a higher number than the amount of girls you slept with. Anyway, the first 4 boomerangs opened in 1984, which includes rides such as Maurice Pierre's Sea Serpent. The only problem was that the boomerangs were rough and bashed your head. Like, we're talking headaches every second of the ride. But I guess that didn't really matter when your options were very limited in the 80s. With the success of the Boomerang, Vekoma went ahead with a flood of new clonable coasters. These even include spin-offs of the Boomerang, but we'll address that later. Now, a few new models were made in the 80s post-Boomerangs. But during this time, Vekoma was practically exclusively making Boomerangs and MK1200s. 3 particular MKs during this time are actually rather infamous for how rough it is. The first was Scream Machine at Expo 86 in 1986, now Ninja at Missouri's Six Flags St. Louis. What's interesting here is that this is supposed to be an Aero coaster that they couldn't complete due to bankruptcy, so Vekoma had to complete the project. That combination, combined with poor track work, means the ride is as horrifically rough as a black kid's GPA. The second was Kamikaze at Dinosaur Beach in 1989, now Blue Hawk at Six Flags over Georgia. Now this ride used to be similar to St. Louis's Ninja, where this ride was extremely rough. However, the ride is more tolerable now due to updated restraints. I'll address that later. The third is Gouderix at Parc Asterix in France, also in 1989. This coaster has an impressive layout for the most inversions on a Vekoma with 7. Unfortunately, Gouderix is the roller coaster equivalent to a teacher's pet. They're both painfully annoying, ruins your day, and you might have the urge to burn it with a flamethrower. However, as rough as their loopers are, Vekoma sure does know how to make good family coasters. Now, some new models they made in the 80s post-Boomerang was Speedy Gonzales at Wiener Prater, now Wild Mouse at Idlewild, their only Wild Mouse ever built. From what I heard, the ride is fun, but it's closed all the time, thus the only one to ever open. Next is their attempt at an aero suspended coaster by building Dreamcatcher at Belgium's Babylon Land. Only 3 ever opened because suspended coasters are very limited with their layouts. And then there's the Illusion coasters. These things were total wax, as it's basically all helix with the longest train I've ever seen. Only 2 were built because they were way too weird for parks to buy. These rides were weird, especially Illusions, and not all that successful, just like you attempting to make money on the black market. But they also made the MK900s and MK700s. These were mid-sized family coasters meant for the indoors with some theming. These family rides were good, but the 90s is when Vekoma would master the family coaster. The reason I say that is because Vekoma introduced 2 new models designed for families. The first was the Mine Train in 1992. Now, multiple manufacturers had tried their attempt to make a good mine train. So basically, everyone copied Aero's homework, like the class copying the smart kids' test answers. As a result, Vekoma didn't sell that many as they'd like, but still produced a reasonable 15. Plus, most people consider Vekoma's Mine Train to be the best of its kind. The other, definitely more popular choice is their junior coaster in 1991. Dubbed the Roller Skater, this is Vekoma's kiddie coaster model. Maybe a little bit bigger, but it's still a kiddie coaster. Now, parks really love these coasters because these kiddie family coasters are great for families. Plus, since these roller skaters are very much Vekoma material, aka this, 114 junior coasters were bought and still are being mass-produced today. Yeah, that's more kiddie coasters than some manufacturers even build roller coasters. So needless to say, this model had much better success than Discord mods making it on YouTube. Also, with the family coasters, Vekoma started making their own trains, whereas previously they had to buy trains from Aero. Unfortunately, while people don't mind their family coasters, their next model is so horrifically bad it might as well have been made by Satan himself. In 1992, B&M introduced the first inverted coaster, Batman the Ride at Six Flags Great America. Now what does Vekoma have to do with this? Well, if you know anything about B&M, you know that their coasters are expensive as f***. We're talking Gucci products with Ferrari pricing. Meanwhile, Vekoma saw potential to make their inverted coasters on the cheap, and oh boy was cheap written all over it. The first one to be built was Condor at Walibi Holland in the Netherlands in 1994. Now admittedly, the ride looks appealing and has a great layout, except Condor is regarded as one of, if not the worst coaster in the world. This is the definition of a janky piece of trash. The issue is that you have bulky restraints, which sucks ass, riding on the roughest track I've ever seen on a coaster. The way I would describe it is if you drove your car on a brick road with 2 cinder blocks in between your head. This shows a flaw found on Vekomas is that their precision was not well put together at all. Despite this, somehow 42 of these monstrosities were built. I'm pretty sure these parks were on drugs when they bought these, because who in their right mind would ride these and think, oh yeah, that's good. I guarantee a few idiots who rode it went something like this.
Hey, do you want to ride Mine Eraser?
I mean, the ride looks scary, but it could be fun.
I mean, how bad can it be?
30 minutes later.
Okay, never let Angel cook up again. Bro, shut the fudge up.
But for real, I have a horrible migraine.
Man, those guys are idiots.
I know, like whoever cooked up needs to get fired.
See, I told you riding the invert was a poor decision.
Says the one who won't ride the kiddie coaster.
Bro, shut the
Okay, so if you're wondering why that sounded like absolute shit, it's because I was recording that in school, outside the buildings, without a mic. I mean, for crying out loud, one of them was recorded in the cafeteria. But anyway, back to the video. That poor decision making is written all over it, just like a drunk at a casino. I think the real reason it took off is because it's trademark Vekoma, aka cheap, low maintenance, and compact. Just in 1995 alone, 7 SLCs already opened 1 year after Condor started torturing riders. Oh, and don't get me started on those Chinese knockoffs. Like, oh my gosh, that's a whole other discussion for another day. With the success of the SLCs, Vekoma decided to match the SLC with their boomerangs. Now, that combination might sound like the worst thing to ever exist. However, the execution actually turned out better than expected, or at least better for Vekoma standards. This would be the Invertigo, which is essentially an inverted boomerang. The first was Hangover at Liseberg in Sweden in 1997. However, this ride experienced problems, causing it to be delayed from 1996 to 1997. The reason is because the Invertigos were meant to be a magnetic launch coaster. However, due to the limited technology at the time, they had to use a standard chain lift. Because of these issues, only 4 were ever produced. This would actually be a major problem for Vekoma for most of their rides entering the new millennium, because their poor decision making would soon catch up to them. I briefly talked about this a while ago with aerodynamics, but let's address it again. While Vekoma had major success in the late 70s to mid 90s, major competition appeared that intrude over Vekoma's territory. The 2 companies Vekoma was most worried about was Intamin and B&M. With Intamin, they began making game-changing rides that was praised because of their quality and uniqueness, even if they weren't the most reliable. We saw this following their breakout coaster, Superman Escape at Six Flags Magic Mountain, with rides such as Volcano the Blast Coaster, Superman the Ride, and Accelerator. As for B&M, well, go watch my B&M video for more details, so here's the short version. B&M pretty much mastered the looping coasters and was making them at higher quality than Vekoma. Both manufacturers were setting high standards for how good a coaster could be. Meanwhile, Vekoma failed to keep up as their old methods began to feel outdated. Because Vekoma was sticking to old building techniques, precision, and low quality construction, all of which were on the cheap, the majority of parks passed on Vekoma for other options. Plus, most Vekomas at these parks always had very poor reception and sometimes even low ridership. To keep up with the ever-changing coaster landscape, Vekoma introduced a handful of new concepts to very lackluster results. At the dawn of the new millennium came the Flying Dutchman. This is the first real flying coaster ever built. Vekoma came up with a way for riders to be in a flying position on a roller coaster. The first is Stealth at California's Great America in 2000. Unfortunately, this ride was extremely unreliable and would constantly close. This is because the major electrical components were on the trains themselves, which would be subjected to the ride's forces and weather. This would constantly trigger faults that would close the ride. These closures would result in only 3 original Flying Dutchmans to be made. The other 2 was X-Flight at Geauga Lake and Batwing at Six Flags America. The next is the giant inverted boomerang. So take the normal Invertigo model, then supersize it to 177 feet and then have the layout be crossed. That's the giant inverted boomerang. These things are extremely forceful, which makes it one of Vekoma's better models. Six Flags alone bought 4 of these bad boys in 2001, 3 Deja Vus for their American parks, and Stuntfall Parque Warner Madrid. However, all 4 of these experienced massive delays and even when they opened faced constant closures. This is because of the finicky trains combined with the inability to run in poor weather. Only 6 were ever opened, which technically did better than the Invertigos. Next is the Wind Coaster. Yeah, that's right, Vekoma made wind coasters in the early 2000s. Whoever came up with this clearly caused their former employer to go bankrupt. They only constructed 3 woodies because, well, who the f is buying a wood coaster from Vekoma? When you have better options like GCI, that's the equivalent of drunk driving with your clothes off. These were at Wallaby Holland, Wallaby Belgium, and Tusenfried. Finally, in 2002, Vekoma tried making such a gimmicky model. This would be Gravity Max at Discovery World in Taiwan. This is so weird because as of right now, this is Vekoma's only tilt coaster. The tilt coaster is similar to B&M's dives, but the crest of the drop tilts to a vertical position. Even though this has clickbait written all over it, the only reason this is the only one open right now is because Gravity Max is in extreme disrepair. According to Maloney Coasters, the operators dispatch 1 train every 20 minutes, which is horrible capacity because that's 96 riders per hour. Vekoma's ability to adapt then was horrible because most of their sales came from roller skaters, SLCs, and loopers. Sales in the mid-2000s slowed down from their heyday in the 90s. Because of this, Vekoma actually filed for bankruptcy in 2001. A lot of the reasons for this was delayed payments by Six Flags over the issues with their coasters. The only models that took off during this was their suspended family coasters. Unfortunately, these were also super shitty, so nobody liked them prior to 2007. I mean, they did make the motorbike coasters, but those were also unreliable due to the complex trains and the hydraulic launch. Funny enough, Aero also filed for bankruptcy that same year due to massive debt following X2. Unfortunately, Aero closed its doors shortly before X2 opened in December 2001. I guaranteed Vekoma would have gone under had it not been for one buyer I failed to mention yet. This would be Disney. In 1991, the Walt Disney Corporation approached Vekoma to build a mine train for their brand new park, Disneyland Paris, then known as Euro Disneyland in Paris, France. This park was scheduled to open for the 1992 season, and Disney wanted Vekoma to construct a Big Thunder Mountain. Big Thunder Mountains are already pretty iconic rides at Disney's castle parks, and Vekoma's take would be the best one yet. When Disneyland Paris opened, most considered their Big Thunder Mountain to be the best ride on opening day. Disney was pleased with Vekoma's results and would continue to work with Vekoma. Their next 3 coasters for Disney would be kiddie coasters for their castle parks. However, Disney urgently needed Vekoma back to Disneyland Paris. Defunctland already made a fantastic video about this park, but basically Disneyland Paris was a huge failure because the park was over budget and not enough guests came. As a result, Disney lost more money on this park than a 40-year-old man did after 2 different divorces. To get this park to turn a profit, Disney hired Vekoma to make the track and layout of their new coaster. This coaster would be Space Mountain, from the Earth to the Moon. Themed to the Jules Verne's book of the same name, this Space Mountain would be the most extreme and elaborately themed one yet. This would be a launched variant of Vekoma's MK1200. Space Mountain, from the Earth to the Moon, would open on June 1st, 1995. The ride was extremely successful due to its impressive ride experience. This is the coaster that saved Disneyland Paris. It even managed to turn a profit for Disney. After this, Vekoma would be the main choice coaster supplier for Disney for years to come. In 1999, Hollywood Studios in Orlando opened the Rock and Roller Coaster. Themed to the Aerosmith Rock and Roll Band, this is Vekoma's first LSM coaster. The layout is extremely similar to premier ride spaghetti bowl coasters such as Flight of Fear at Kings Island. What's shocking is that this Vekoma is a smooth ride. Now it still uses aero restraints so headbanging is possible, but compared to the boomerangs, it's smooth. This is a common theme with Disney Vekomas. This is because with the money Disney has, they are better able to maintain their coasters. You can't say the same with some of their competitors, especially Six Flags. This specific layout was cloned twice. The first is Express Platform 13 at Wallaby Holland, an outdoor version. The other is now Avengers Assemble Flight Force at Walt Disney Studios Park, then known as Rock and Roller Coaster. What's interesting with this one is that this is in the same resort as Space Mountain, which is a very similar ride to this. In 2005, Vekoma copy and paste Disneyland Space Mountain for Hong Kong Disneyland. The next year in 2006, Vekoma built their most impressive coaster yet for Disney, Expedition Everest at Disney's Animal Kingdom. The way I would describe Everest is a supersized mine train. This is immersively themed to a huge mountain in Asia. The ride hugs the ground and weaves through the mountain. Expedition Everest also marked an important change to Vekoma's track. Before this, most of Vekoma's throw rides had bogey wheels on the inside of the track. This made sense back then when Aero was in its prime, but as the coaster landscape evolved, this track became outdated. So they used an updated track with the running wheels on the outside similar to their kiddie coasters. In 2012, Hong Kong Disneyland received Big Grizzly Mountain runaway mine cars. This Vekoma mine train is highly themed with a launch and a backwards section. In 2014, Magic Kingdom got Seven Doors Mine Train, a mine train with rocking cars, with a clone going to Shanghai Disneyland in 2016. But at that same park that year, they opened one of Vekoma's best, Tron Light Cycle Power Run at Shanghai Disneyland. This is a highly themed Vekoma motorbike using an LSM launch. The ride heavily relies on visual effects to tell a story. Tron was praised for its theming. This would prey on its influence on 2 other coasters at the Walt Disney World Resort. First was Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind at Epcot in 2022. This unique spinning coaster also relies on visuals to tell a story, but also throws in some nice forces. This is among Vekoma's best coasters. The other is a clone of Tron at the Magic Kingdom in 2023. This coaster follows closely to Shanghai's, but notice the dramatic increase in quality with these coasters. The Vekomas of today are the bombs compared to when Disney started working with them. I believe this occurred around the time when Expedition Everest opened. With Disney paying the funds for Vekoma to thrive, they analyzed their catalog and realized how shit they were. They did show hope in making great rides with their failed models, and even 2 British SLCs that are actually very decent. Odyssey at Fantasy Island and Kumali at Flamingo Land. They showed promise, but it wasn't what Vekoma needed. Vekoma realized that if they want to go back to where they were just 10 years ago, they have to make much higher quality coasters with dynamic layouts with the same clonable format. Vekoma began the remodeling process by redoing the design of their suspended family family coasters. They rolled out 2 suspended family coasters in Europe in 2007, Jimmy Neutron at Movie Park Germany and Kvasten at Grönland. These were far more comfortable than previous attempts. As someone who's ridden one from 2004, those are way too rough for kids to enjoy, but with these, the smoothness and open air restraints make it a hit for families. This would jumpstart the suspended family with an additional 24 installations, but it's worth noting that this occurred around the same time that Maverick at Cedar Point opened. Maverick is an Intamin LSM launch coaster that is credited for ending the coaster wars. This coaster stands only 105 feet, but it's popular for its intense layout and is filled with positives, negatives, and laterals. Vekoma saw the success of Maverick and realized they need to get ahead of the competition. Their first true coaster remodel is Stingray at Giant Wheels Park in China. This is a redesigned flying coaster that's meant for parks with even tighter money and land. This flyer uses smaller, updated Flying Dutchman trains on a rather vertical layout. This is the flying coaster equivalent to the Intamin Zaxby's in We all know how those turned out. This is the only Stingray variant ever built because Stingray constantly triggered faults and Vekoma would have to send workers to China. This coaster isn't even open anymore as it closed in 2018. Honestly, their next new gen coaster wouldn't turn out much better. In 2010, Vekoma shipped out Battlestar Galactica at Universal Studios Singapore. This is a dueling coaster with one side being a family sit-down and the other being a looping invert. This is also the first coaster to feature Vekoma's vest restraints. If you ever rode a new gen Vekoma or even some of their older models, you probably noticed that instead of over the shoulder, there's a vest restraints. These are overhead lap bars paired with a soft and flexible vest harness. These vests make it to where headbanging is impossible. We previously saw vests on B&M flying coasters, and while Vekoma did use some form of a vest on their flyers, those have the stiffness of a during a boner. They first rolled out their vests on Maurice Pierce SLC, Great Nor'easter, but we'll address that later. Battlestar Galactica would be the first sit-down coaster to use the vest, which would be the default restraints for their thrill coasters. Unfortunately, just like Stingray, Galactica suffered from triggers and stress fractures. Luckily, Universal was able to fix the coaster and is now open. One thing to note is that Vekoma made 2 different train designs using vests. The first is for their new designs with their modern-day track. The other is actually for their MK1200 design. Because the aero trains are seen as outdated today, Vekoma took it upon themselves to fix their old coasters with the new trains. The first to switch for the new vest is Hershey Park Sidewinder, now known as Jolly Rancher Remix today. This change drastically improved the ride as headbang was practically gone. This revolution applied to their family coasters, which were very comfortable for families. This would be what caused the success of Vekoma's next family hit, the Family Boomerang. So take the core of the boomerangs and apply them to their junior coasters. That's the Family Boomerang, which consists of 2 shallow spikes and a series of turns and bumps. The first was Accelerator at Drayton Manor in 2011. This prototype layout uses a spike, low ground turn to the left, a clockwise helix, another spike, and then repeat the process backwards. The Family Boomerangs has at least 33 installed, and they are still widely popular today. From 2017 to 2015, Vekoma has been working hard to change their image as a high-quality company. Vekoma still made layouts that could be cloned for cheap, but those clones would ride far better than their old coasters. Aside from Battlestar and Stingray, they built better versions of their family and kiddie coasters, while also fixing their older designs. They also had their fair share of one-offs, such as Big Air and Bandit Bomber. In 2013, a suspended family coaster would be built in Denmark at Fair of Summerland. Called Orkanen, this coaster has a great layout and underrated forces for a family coaster. This coaster is also important because it introduces 2 things. The first is that Vekoma could make really good coasters that didn't always close down. The other is that Vekoma brought in a new designer in Benjamin Blumendahl. Vekoma's previous designers like Peter Clarks and Stephen Holtman did bring potential to the table, but Blumendahl would be the driver for quality. We would see the ultimate revelation in 2016. You know how I said Vekoma opened Tron in Shanghai in 2016? They also produced another ride in Poland that would be the epitome of Vekoma. This is Formula at Energylandia. Now, Poland's Energylandia is basically Vekoma's second best friend. This is because Energylandia has been buying Vekomas every year since 2015, when they received a clone of Orkanen in Dragon. They decided to bite the bullet for Formula, the prototype Space Warp. This is a small launch coaster with whippy elements. I mentioned Maverick, the Intamin launch coaster. Vekoma would use the Intamin LSM coaster for inspirations for the marquee models new gen Vekoma would be known for. Formula follows the layout of a launch, 98-foot sidewinder, airtime hill, corkscrew, outer bank turn, another corkscrew, over banks, and then the brakes. While Formula is a good ride, more coasters like this would soon to come, and we wouldn't wait long to see one of Vekoma's best coasters ever. Ignoring most of their family coasters since they take up 70% of Vekoma's catalog, let's stay in Poland for this next one. An hour hour away from Energylandia, Legendia created the Let coaster in 2017. This is Vekoma's one and only Bermuda Blitz model, a coaster very similar to the Space Warp but with a chain lift. This is regarded as one of Vekoma's best coasters ever because Let coaster is one of the most intense coasters in the world. We're talking extreme elements designed to make you gray out. Let coaster has so many moments of massive positive G-forces, and the fact it also has ejector airtime adds more fuel to the fire. For example, the pullout of the first drop has riders seeing gray throughout the dive loop and lasts until the first airtime hill. I dubbed it Mini I-305 due to its intensity. Now, Let coaster could be seen as too intense for some people, as some of Vekoma's newer thrill models are light on the positives, but I'll address that later. To show how far Vekoma has gone, we have to look at what they did to two SLCs in 2017. The first was the last SLC ever built, Queen Cobra in Vietnam. This SLC is much more re-rideable because of two fixes. First, this SLC uses Vekoma's SLC vest restraints. The vest used to remove headbang has actually been appearing more and more on their old inverts. However, it's important to note that just because you put new trains doesn't mean the ride gets better. Case in point, the original Condor at Wallaby. And one important note, don't ever put non-Vekoma trains on old Vekoma coasters. Case in point, T3 and Goliath, which is why the second part is so crucial, and that's improved track work. This SLC runs so much better because it runs smoothly. Since you're not getting thrown around like dodgeballs to a fat kid, you can appreciate the layout. These same traits are also found on Roller Coaster Mayan, Energylandia's SLC from 2015. But to show how good Vekoma is, let's head to Maurice Pier's Great Nor'easter. You know how Maurice Piers doesn't have any land to expand? Because of that, Maurice usually puts in the money to fix and maintain their rides. With Great Nor'easter, even though Maurice put vests in 2008, they took it one step further. They had Vekoma come in and replace the entire track of Nor'easter with their new track for $4 million. That's actually really impressive because parks rarely ever retrack steel coasters. The last time that happened was when your mom slept with a different guy every week in high school. As a result, Great Nor'easter is now considered Vekoma's best inverted coaster and praised Maurice for the work they did. While they did amazing work improving their coasters and expanding their family lineup, 2019 and beyond is the point of no return. In 2018, Vekoma was acquired by Sansei Technologies. In case you don't know, Sansei is a Japanese manufacturer most infamous for Twist Coaster Robin. Now they're known for being the parent company of American manufacturer SNS Worldwide. With a parent company behind their back, Vekoma can produce new, albeit similar thrill models left and right. We first saw this in 2019 with a duo of hyperspace warps in China. It's worth noting that China and Asia in general has been the forefront of new-gen Vekomas going back to 4 SLCs in the mid-2000s. Side note, why did only 4 SLCs lead to over 300 different knockoffs? Anyway, back to the hyperspace warp. This is a near clone of Formula, but uses a chain lift instead of a launch. We're not sure how good it is since it's in China, but the few reviews online says it's good. But this really ramps up in 2020 with 3 new thrill coasters. The first is Wrath of Zeus at VN Wonders in Vietnam, the Vekoma Firestorm. This is basically a cross between Let coaster and Formula. This is a mid-scale launch coaster that I heard is extremely forceful. While Zeus has a couple sets of annoying trims, the ride should be fun. Next is Hals Überkopf at Tripsdrill in Germany, the suspended thrill coaster. If that sounds familiar, that's because this is Vekoma's updated inverted coaster model. Not too long after the Great Nor'easter retrack, Vekoma discontinued the SLC because those were considered outdated, rough, and sometimes too intense. So Vekoma released the STC, a much more comfortable and re-rideable coaster. Hals Überkopf gracefully floats through the inversions and twists as this coaster appeals much more to riders with a lower intensity threshold. Finally, another one of Vekoma's perfections is F.L.Y. at Phantasialand in Germany, a further updated flying coaster. Fly is the definition of perfection because this coaster is immersively themed and very much well presented. The theme is about flying in the olden days, which is represented with the steampunk feel. Fly's ride system itself is designed to have the ultimate flying experience. You gracefully fly around Rookburg, weaving through plenty of turns and even offering airtime, helped by the trains which were designed for the best comfort and fastest operations. This, Let Coaster, and Cosmic Rewind are the trio of what represents Vekoma's best. But the thrills didn't stop there, because in 2021 came 2 new launch models. First is the Top Gun. This coaster uses extremely small trains, only fitting 8 riders per train. This is because the elements were designed to be much more whippier to take full advantage of the smaller trains. We don't have much reviews since, like the hyperspace warps, these are exclusively found in China. The other is the Shockwave. This is Vekoma's biggest launch coaster they offer, where the layout is far larger and more spread out. Most people who've ridden one definitely rode Abyssus at Energylandia. This coaster is not too intense and instead is very fun. The next year in 2022 came Phoenix at Fair Up Summerland. This is Vekoma's lone Wildcat model. Most people call this tame or let coaster. This coaster shares many similarities to the let coaster, but the big difference is that Phoenix packs less G-forces. This makes sense due to Fair Up's majority guests being families, so they didn't want a coaster to scare the living daylights out of them. In my opinion, that's a good choice considering what happened with I-305. But that's not all Vekoma had in 2022, because they also debuted Invincible Warrior, the only renegade. This is basically if Vekoma took Phoenix and made it more RMC-like with RMC-type elements. This makes sense for two reasons. The first is that due to the RMC hype right now, multiple companies have been implementing RMC elements on their coasters. The other reason is that Vekoma actually works with RMC. This goes back to a 2013 deal where Vekoma would handle the sales of RMC's international projects. This mostly still holds up today, as Vekoma helped introduce some of RMC's best work overseas, such as Zadra, Hakuge, and ironically Untamed. What's ironic about the latter is that they RMC'd their own coaster, Robin Hood, the wooden coaster. Now, I didn't mention most of their family coasters, especially the newer ones, because this video is already long as f***, and addressing all those family coasters mean we'd be here for 2 hours. But we have to address some here because of their influence in 2023. One thing I have yet to mention is that Vekoma's renaissance barely made it to America, which means to most broke Americans, Vekoma is still mostly seen as roller skaters, boomerangs, and SLCs, with also 2 Six Flags loopers. Some Discord mods like to think that parks have extreme beef with Vekoma similarly to Intamin, but in practice, this is due to Sansei's business structure. They had SNS handle the American projects while they sent Vekoma overseas. We saw this in 2019 with both Max Force and Steel Curtain, except both are reliability nightmares for their parks. The only Vekomas produced between 2007 and 2018 are 4 family coasters ironically fabricated from Chance Rides. In 2008, Vekoma struck a deal with Chance to fabricate track for Vekoma in America. 4 coasters in America were made under this deal. 2 at Hard Rock Park that now operate in Vietnam, Steel Lasso at Frontier City in 2008, and SFC, and this opened after the deal fell, Freedom Flyer at Fun Spot Orlando in 2013. In 2012, the deal between Vekoma and Chance ended and that both companies would approach the American market differently. We wouldn't get a taste of true Vekoma until 2019. That year, Dollywood and Tennessee opened their kids area, Wildwood Grove. One of their opening rides was a clone of Orkanen in Dragon Flyer. We already know this ride is good, especially that forceful overbank I somehow forgot to mention. But this is a good start. Next is another suspended family coaster. Wow, these things are wildly popular, which makes sense. Comparing Kitty Hawk to Dragon Flyer, that's basically comparing gold to a pile of turd you found in your yard. Anyway, next is Phoenix at New York's Coney Island. This is the definition of pure fun. Ride's not intense, but it's enjoyable. Skipping the Disney Vekomas ahead to 2023 when shit really starts rolling. Ignoring Tron since Disney took longer to open it than it did the terrorists to destroy the Twin Towers. In 2023, we got introduced to Big Bear Mountain at Dollywood. This Part 2 expansion to Wildwood Grove, this is Vekoma's family launch coaster. Are you familiar with rides such as Slinky Dog Dash or the Intamin Straddle coasters? Vekoma took rides like those and supersized it while making it tame enough for families, which is evident by its 39-inch height requirement. This is basically the launch modern mine train. Big Bear has very forceless launches with very gradual elements. With its 39-inch height limit, Big Bear is a great long enjoyment for kids and parents. 2 more family launch coasters were planned, with one already opened, Lightning at Furuvik in Sweden. A lot of parks seem to have ridden this because 3 different Vekomas will open in 2024 in America. 2 are family boomerangs. I'm surprised it took this long for these to come to America. Gerstlauer already beat Vekoma to the punch with Rewind Racer in California. Luckily, the 2 coming seems to be a great fit for their respective parks. That's Snoopy's Soapbox Racer at Kings Island and Good Gravy at Holiday World. The other is where American nerds will finally get to ride a new gen Vekoma thrill coaster, Flash Vertical Velocity at Six Flags Great Adventure. No, this isn't the duo of intimate impulses in the Six Flags chain. This is instead a Vekoma Super Boomerang. Do you remember Hall's Uber Call? Well, they did the same thing with their boomerangs. The last old boomerang they made was in 2019 in China, where more knockoffs were made from it. After this, they discontinued the old boomerangs for the new Super Boomerang. This is a very compact multi-launch coaster that runs rather slow, but that's deliberate to allow maximum hang time, particularly with the Immelman stall and the high barrel roll to the spike. One already opened in 2023 in China at Fanta Wild Wonderland called Cloud Shuttle. Great Adventure bought this for the combination of trademark Vekoma, aka this, and also to celebrate their 50th anniversary. And that's not to mention they're set to open more coasters this year. They have even more family coasters, Top Gun, an STC, a Firestorm, and even a Ghost Rider set to open. As of the writing of this video, we're still in early 2024, so most of these in 2024 haven't opened yet, but there's two unique Vekomas I want to address. First is Jungle Rush at Dreamworld in Australia. This is supposed to be Vekoma's take on the Dark Ride coaster. Think rides like Revenge of the Mummy at Universal or Movie Park Studio Tour. This should be a nicely immersive coaster using so-called tricks. The other actually isn't set to open until 2025. At least I hope so, since this has been delayed longer than your will to talk to a girl. This is Circuit Breaker at Codaland in Austin, Texas. Remember Gravity Max from earlier? Well, Vekoma felt it's time to bring back the tilt coaster, and Codaland made the first move to build these improved coasters. Unlike Gravity Max, which is essentially a one-trick pony, Circuit Breaker will tack a full layout on top of the signature drop. We have the stock layout rendering that includes the following: the tilt drop, which should be scary good, the Top Gun inversion, aka a rollover camelback. This element is exclusively found on Vekoma's Top Gun coasters. A whippy fast 0G roll, an Immelman stall, and then several switchback hills and another hardline roll into the station. Circuit Breaker should be one of Vekoma's best from the drop and hang time. Now that's assuming Codaland can actually get this motherfucker to open. Codaland is essentially a racetrack with some rides and we all know what happened there. What's funny is that this isn't the only tilt coaster opening. You know that park that's building Falcon's Flight in Saudi Arabia? Well, they're also building a different Vekoma tilt coaster, and even one's planned for Gronalund sometime down the line, and that is currently where we're at with Vekoma right now. Wow, this video took a dang long time to make. When all is said and done, this video will be fatter than queso after 10 rounds at McDonald's. But that just goes to show the complete rises and falls of Vekoma. They really came a long way. Almost 100 years ago, Vekoma exclusively made farming tools, and throughout the years, Vekoma went from making looping coasters from Aero to now making world-class launch coasters and fun family coasters. While they went through their hype in the 80s, Vekoma was left behind during the peak of the first coaster wars. But now Vekoma is doing better than ever and more prepared to battle in this new wave of roller coasters. And Aero really came full circle with Vekoma. One thing I forgot to mention is that every company Vekoma collaborated with had major ties to Aero. Aero already gave Vekoma their track technology in their rookie stages, but Aero had employees leave to form DH Morgan, which was later bought by Chance Rides. But wait, there's more, cause you know how Aero shut down? SNS Worldwide bought the assets of Aero, and they and Vekoma are now in the same parent folder. Finally, X2 designer Alan Schilke worked with SNS before working with RMC, bringing the Aero collab in full circle. While they have their pain, most parks of all loved modern Vekoma because they are cheap, compact, reliable, for the most part, low maintenance, decent capacity, and the guests love the newer ones for their comfort and smoothness. And if F.L.Y is any indication, it's possible that they can pack a complete coaster in small footprints and be very well themed. While Vekoma still holds titles for worst roller coaster ever, SLCs and Guderiks, Vekoma is still building to become one of the best coaster manufacturers. With all that said, I hope Vekoma continues to improve their coasters. Thank you all so much for watching this video. This video was a massive undertaking, so thank you so much for watching to the end. Because Vekoma built 420 coasters, you definitely rode at least one. So which one's your favorite / least favorite? Leave all that down in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, which you watched to the end so you definitely did, please leave a like. Also, really please consider subscribing and turning on notifications. It only takes 5 seconds to do, and that motivates me to make more great content in the future. Literally, we have 13 different ride analyze videos from this company alone, so you don't want to miss that. If you want a new gen Vekoma for your home park, or better yet, even tear down their SLC, they'll do it if you press that red button. Also, shout out to the people on screen who helped voice the stick figures in this video. Finally, watch these two videos that popped up on your screen when you're done. This is the Coaster Flood, riding out.